everybody, thank you for coming back to my channel. Today I'd like to share with you a conversation I had with Sarah Goehrke. She is a 3D printing journalist and founder of her own company, and she's also my friend from high school. Her sister, Mary Beth Anderson Kepler, was in my class, and we did an interview with Mary Beth, which you can also check out. In this conversation with Sarah, we talked about the up-and-coming technology of 3D printing, as well as increasing the diversity in the workplace. So hope you enjoy. Well, hi, Sarah. It's so nice to see you after so many years. You look beautiful, just as I remember you from high school. Like, I know your sister, right? Like, she was in my class, and I knew her better, and we hung out together, right? So I definitely remember, like, both of you are just like so happy and just, upbeat all the time. And I really miss that. I really miss having those, like, I don't know if you remember, like, those like crazy jokes. And I remember you guys would just like start singing sometimes, and it's just so much fun.
I think it helps you and I really knew each other from the kind of theatrical side of high school. So
exactly. Yeah, and there was like that little theater sort of like inside joke stuff, and I miss that. And I still remember like those musicals that we did, and it was like a bit ridiculous, thinking about it now. But I still loved it. Like, I enjoyed it so much, and even now, I feel like that really helped me, personally, like feel confident, like in front of an audience, and because I was a very shy person, in high school.
Oh my gosh, me too.
So thinking back, I feel like that was one of the few times that I really felt like I belonged, in a high school that, mostly people who didn't look like me, right? But I think in our little drama world, we found a lot of very, very close friends and like bonded over that.
There's a good community of misfits and weirdos. And,
we're all really weird.
I loved it. Yeah, those are my people.
Exactly. So can you tell me a little bit, maybe just like from your perspective, like growing up and what it was like for you, like in high school or maybe like then college, whatever you want to tell me about kind of your growing up journey, I guess.
Yeah, so growing up, I know that you've already done one of these interviews with my older sister, Mary Beth. She's 2 years older than me. She was in your year in Mayfield. And so growing up kind of in her shadow, I was Mary Beth's little sister, and we had two older half sisters from my dad's first marriage, Katie and Eileen, who also went through the Mayfield school system. Okay. And they were both complete rock stars. Like, Eileen, brilliant, to this day brilliant. She pioneered her own PhD program at Case that she teaches now as a tenured professor. Like, insanely brilliant. I'm going to keep using that word because, like,
oh, awesome. I didn't know them, right? Because they were older than us.
Yeah, they're 10 and 14 years older than me. So, wow. Especially in the schooling system, I didn't really, but teachers' memories are longer. And then my sister Katie was a crazy standout in theater and especially the choral department. Amazing voice. She started, when she went in college, she went in as a vocal major at first.
Wow.
And now she has a PhD as well. She's a professor at Kent, and she's training the next generation of teachers. And she still has a gorgeous voice. Like, she's so talented. And then, skip down that decade to Mary Beth and me. And Mary Beth was so social in high school, especially. And then there's me, like the baby of the Anderson family. And I was so shy. So I kind of found my little like pockets where I belonged and made my niches. Like, I was in the AEP program through school, which really helped kind of keep me afloat. It was the Advanced Educational Programming group that I joined in 6th grade. And from high school on, whenever I could, like, that's where I ate my lunch. That's where I took my free period. That's where it was just this tiny, tiny room, like literally it could have been a closet.
Yeah, I wasn't part of that program, but I always felt like a lot of my friends were, and they had this little like, secret, not secret, but like this little like hideout kind of thing. And like sometimes like I would, see people go there. I'm like, well, what are they? I had no idea what it was until like I graduated. I was like, oh, that was a program. It was crazy.
Yeah, It was great in middle school. There was a room there and we would do those like super cool 3D puzzles,
Oh,
and we could do just extra work and extra kind of advanced pieces, which was hilarious because like that was kind of what I hung my hat on as a kid. Like, okay, well, Mary Beth's the social one. I guess I'll be the smart one. But the first advanced programming in the Mayfield School District was in math, which is not my area. I am not a math person and I wish I was, but I was in honors math from 6th grade on because like that was the only honors. That was it in middle school. So I took it because, I was 11 and wanted that, like, I need somewhere to belong kind of feeling. So I was like, I guess I'm one of the smart kids. That's what they tell me because I read a lot of books and I do well on standardized tests, but not a math person. So I was in the honors program getting like straight B's. And I was.
you're in it for the social aspect.
Yeah, I was in it for that. And I was also a year younger than everyone else because I'm a September baby.
Oh.
And my birthday was a week shy of the cutoff for the next grade. So I really like my direct peers were the year below me, but I was in the academic program for like a year above me. So there was nothing really like at my level when I was 11, like I should have been doing the work for 11-year-olds, but I was already in classes with 12-year-olds doing work for 13-year-olds.
Wow.
In an area that like I wasn't great at. In high school, I remember two of us from the, I don't know if it was trigonometry. I don't remember what class it was, but two of us were taken outside and the math teacher was like, okay, look, you guys are in honors math, you're doing fine, but you both have D's and we don't want that to be. And I was like literally crying because I have this weird deep-seated fear of failure based on nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't like failing. I mean, no one does.
No
but
one does.
like, it hit hard when that's where you identify. Like I'm the smart kid, and smart kids don't get D's.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be weighted, to be a C, and that was kind of the benefit of the honors class. But it's like I can't get a D, and so he told the two of us who were underperforming in the honors math class, like if you do the work and do this and can pull off straight C's, I'll give you a B. And, I don't want to ruin your GPA. So we'll do it, for this quarter, and then I'll change the grade at the semester. And I've never worked harder on math in my life. I got the B, which was weighted like an A. So it still did great for my GPA because in high school that mattered.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely dropped math as soon as I could in senior year, because then in 8th grade when I went to the high school, because Mayfield was so weirdly organized at the time, so like 5 through 7 I was in the middle school, and then 8 through 12 in the high school.
Mm-hmm.
We had the
8-9 building, remember the 8-9 building and the 10-12 building?
So I was always like a year younger and then a year earlier in high school, because like after 8th grade you're like, yay, I'm a real high schooler, but then you're still a freshman.
Right.
That's so depressing. Like you're just the bottom of a new barrel. So
and now you're doing 3D printing and engineering stuff. Does that math stuff come back to haunt you?
Yes, I spend most of my time talking to engineers and these people who are just amazing at thinking in all these ways that make no sense to me. Like I understand it when they explain it, and my job as a journalist, as a writer, as a content producer is what I always tell people, translating engineering to lay people.
Right.
I'll do these interviews with these incredible applications engineers, materials engineers, all of these like ridiculous technology, brilliant minds. And then I funnel it down so anyone can understand it. And the idea is, general public, depending what media I'm producing for, or decision makers in management positions who, spoiler alert, also aren't generally the most technically inclined.
Right.
But it's so they can understand what engineers are doing and why that matters. So I kind of position myself in that translator role, which fits the word language, the, English side of things that I really actually should have been in honors programs for, and was once they existed from 8th grade on. But
Wow.
it was words for me.
I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I'm a material science engineer, don't hate me. So I actually went to school, for undergrad for material science engineering. I mean, I'm not in the, 3D printing or polymer side, but I know what you mean. I think there's a lot of engineering speak that is like in that, and I don't think it's even that complicated, but people make it sometimes sound complicated. You know what I mean? So I definitely love that, you're able to digest that, like translate that, and then make meaningful sense, like to people who are making decisions or just for people who are interested. Because I think it's technology. The point of technology is to make people's lives better, right?
Right. And there needs to be that human impact. And, you can be in the lab and talk about tensile strength all day, but no one understands what that means. And they're like, well, why are you simulating break points? It's like, well, here's what that means, like from the actual tensile strength standpoint and what that means for you, which might just boil down to it's gonna break if you do this.
Yeah, like, it will not be good. Things will break.
If this, then break.
Yeah.
If this, then point to failure.
Yeah, wow, that's so cool. So I want to ask you too, like I know, we were both in the theater like program, and you actually went to undergrad. You had a double major in one of your majors. So was Spanish and theater? Is that right?
It was English and theater with a Spanish minor.
I'm sorry. Okay, because I knew it was a language. I got the wrong language.
No, you can do anything with a liberal arts degree. I went to Muskingum College, which is now a university, which I'm still like not on board with.
Okay.
It was eligible to be a university for years before they made the leap. But I graduated from Muskingum College.
Okay.
And so it was really easy because we had these liberal arts essentials that we had to take as part of just our degree from the university. And so it was really easy once you kind of focused in on an area to be like, well, I have this many classes. This can also be a major. So could this, and maybe a minor. Like, frankly, I would have been a triple major, except by the time I looked at my Spanish requirements, I needed at least a semester abroad to actually fulfill the major requirements, but I wanted to graduate in 4 years and I hadn't planned for that.
Right.
So I was like, a Spanish minor is okay. So I have my bachelor's degree. It was in English kind of literature focus, theater with a practical directing focus, and a minor in Spanish language.
That's so cool. So I think the English part makes a lot of sense, right? Like in terms of journalism and writing. I'm just curious, I'm sure this applies, but like how does the theater background help you, right, in your job? Because I think a lot of times, like I talk to some high school students and they're like, oh, I want to major in something that's going to help me find a job. And especially when somebody starts talking about like music or art or theater, then they're like, oh, that's scary because, where are the jobs, right? You know what I mean? So I want to kind of explore that and just, can you say something about the theater and how that has shaped you or has helped you?
Like, I definitely would not be who I am or where I am without that theater background. And it came on really suddenly. Like, I remember I was 14 and through AEP, we got these programs for summer camps and different programs at universities throughout Ohio. And I was super drawn to this theater program at Wright State University. So I went there in the summer of 99 or 2000 and did this program, and we wrote our own musical and performed it, and like kind of like we designed the sets, but there was a technical theater side that built the sets and did all of that. And so I built up, like kind of learning what it actually means to be in a working theater shop. Because like at Mayfield, we did a ton for all of our productions, like especially on the play side more than the musicals. We built all the sets. After the final show, we stayed until 2 a.m. and would strike the set. And so it was really this all-encompassing kind of thing. And once I got in college, I also worked in the theater shop for a few years.
I mean, I think a lot of people don't really know just how much it goes into a theater production, right? Like you said, like it's not just the acting, it's the sets, it's the technical part, it's the sound, it's the design, the directing. I mean, it's
Yeah, so
crazy.
there were definitely a few aspects of kind of the theater ethos that really informed a lot of my working philosophy to this day. And I still try to be involved in theater whenever I can be, but obviously that's difficult now working full time, traveling internationally when we're not in a pandemic. And now I have a 1-year-old, so everything is just,
Yeah.
but I still do it when I can. But anyway, like, especially in all of the theater work I did in my late teens to early 20s, the two things that were really driven home at all points were many hands make light work.
Mm,
And if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, don't be late.
mm-hmm.
And so those two things just really have stuck with me through everything. And they mean so much to me. And especially having been in leadership positions throughout my career now for a while, we'll say, I always try to focus on that aspect of, especially many hands make light work. Like everything that we're doing, it's to put on something. There's always a goal. With theater, it's the production that goes before the audience, and you can't do that by yourself. So as much as people want to say, oh, you're an actor, you're a diva, like a diva can't exist in a bubble. I mean, ignoring 2020, 2021, where everyone literally exists in a bubble. But that person is part of an acting company. That person is part of a show. That person is part of a cast. And that cast relies on the director. The director relies on the stage manager. The stage manager relies on the technical crew. The technical crew and everyone rely on the playwright. That all depends also, on the staging, on the production team, on the physical space, on the audience, on the community that fosters the particular theater production. So like it all has to come together. And where many hands make light work is very literal when you're building a set.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes, 3 people to raise the flat in a minute, whereas one person physically cannot do it alone. And if they do, it's one person like, oh no. And it's this terrible thing. Once you get 3, 4, 5 people raising the same flat, it's done, in instance. And so just when you all work together and you keep in mind the organizational goal you're working toward, then you realize it's so much easier as part of a team, and not just easier, but achievable and better.
Mm-hmm.
No one can exist alone in some kind of functional driving capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. So now in your job, do you also feel like there's people, like you said, like supporting each other, like making sure that picking up the slack and working together towards a goal?
Absolutely. Like I founded my own company a couple of years ago, and I'm a company of one. So it's just me technically, but my primary client, Fabbaloo, is run by a team, and there are 3 of us, and we have meetings once a week, and we're like, here's what I'm working on, here's what I saw from your work, here's where this goes, here's what we're all doing together. We have these meetings to just really work out the pipeline and our goals and what we're each contributing to those. And then, for my business by myself, I have to talk to my clients all the time, like understand their goals, where I fit into them, what we're accomplishing together. And then the work that I do on the board of Women in 3D Printing, it's a huge organization. There are 10,000 of us the world over. And 5 of us on the board, but then 70 chapters worldwide, and then all these members, and then. And so just all of it is collaborative, just all the time. And so I think that comes into play for everything we do. Like anytime I'm talking to companies and they're like, it would work well if we worked with this company, but they don't really collaborate. I'm like, well, they need to. because when you're talking an industry as new as 3D printing, no one company is going to do it by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not this company revolution, it's the next evolution of manufacturing. And so it takes all of them. And then once you get into that, it's like all of the hardware companies need to collaborate with the material companies, need to collaborate with the software companies, need to collaborate with the end users.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not all talking to each other, nothing's going to happen. Or you'll have, like, what's happened for generations of this equipment is people will produce these incredibly overpowered pieces of hardware that can't do anything because the software is not advanced enough to tell it what to do so precisely. Like, when the software evolves to that point, the printer can do it, but not until it's programmed to. And then even if it can, if the materials can't stand up to that, it's all kind of useless. Like, I made this beautiful, useless thing, which is what a lot of people still think the industry is. And so it's just like, it needs that collaboration. And understanding that and just going in with humility and expecting teamwork, I think gets you a lot farther than ego. And the same things on stage. Like, there's that old thing that everyone hates: there are no small actors, or there are no small roles, only small actors.
Right.
But, like, I will always remember what the high school theater director, Mr. Clarkson, would tell us. Like, the single best actor he said he ever saw on stage was a spear carrier in an episode, or in a production of Othello. And so this guy was just like standing to the side. He was one of, two spear carriers who would be flanking the king, and he would just kind of look around. But then as soon as he realized someone had taken a step, he was like, oh crap, like, I need to be here with my spear. And so he would be so in the moment that you could tell, like, this guy is a spear carrier. Like, it's not a role you would really think to be proud of, but it added that realism. And I worked for a decade at the local Renaissance Festival.
Mm.
It's technically a medieval festival out this way, but people know them as Ren Fairs, so there we are. But for a decade, I worked there as a cast member, then as a cast director and a member of the entertainment staff.
Oh, cool.
And so what we always talked about is the village makes the king, because you can cast someone as the king, but he doesn't matter unless every villager, every noble, every peasant, every fairy even is like, oh my gosh, it's the king.
Oh,
Like, there's
that's
the king.
it's like the reaction to the king, right?
Because a guy can walk out all puffed up and important, and the patrons who are there enjoying the day are just like, well, that's a fancy man. But when suddenly all of the peasants are dropping down in the dirt and bowing and scraping, and the nobles who have been all puffed up themselves suddenly start bowing, you're like, oh, I need to pay attention. Like, that is someone who is important. So it literally is, it takes a village to make a king. And so from, like, impressions to how it happens, because, like, anyone can issue an edict, but if people don't find that person to be in a position of authority, why would they listen?
That's so interesting. It just reminds me, like, I've been through a lot of different, leadership trainings or like leadership conferences, and a lot of times, like, we'll hear this, like, how to be a good follower, right? And I always felt like maybe, 5-10 years ago, I always felt like it's kind of BS, like, I don't want to be a follower. I want to be a leader. Like, I'm here to be, learn how to be a leader, but I think the older I got and the more experiences I got, is like, wow, what it really means to be a leader is not to, like, tell everybody what to do, but really to listen and, like, do what other people want you to do, So it's very different.
Understanding that is so important. And I know, like, in A Song of Ice and Fire, George R.R. Martin really hammered it home with, any man who has to say, I am the king, is no true king.
Ah, mm-hmm.
Like, if you have to be the one walking around going, I'm the king, y'all.
Right.
But are you? Are you?
Yeah. Oh, so interesting. Cool. So, I'm curious, I'm a material science engineer. I don't know a lot about 3D printing. I've seen some of the 3D printed, gadgets, if you will. And, like, for my work, and my husband works at GE, he sometimes will do some of those, like, models. So that's, like, as far as I know. So I don't know if this is too much to ask, but can you give sort of like a quick overview of maybe, what, and the industry, like you said, has changed a lot, right? Even in the past few years. But for people who don't really know, like, or very new to this industry, can you sort of give a quick overview of like how it all kind of started and like where it is now and maybe what you think like the future holds? I know that's a very big question, but you can probably talk for like 24 hours on that.
Basically.
Sorry.
No, so the research that started to lead into 3D printing really started in the 1950s and 60s when certain scientists, especially around Japan, I believe, really initiated a lot for like, what if things could be built up? A lot of it was shelved because there just wasn't a lot of capability at that time or interest, which is really the bigger thing, like interest and investment have to be in place to create something new.
Right.
And so
That's a
a
lot
lot of
earlier than I would imagine, but like 50s and 60s. Yeah.
so a lot of it was really shelved. So the real, like what we understand as 3D printing emerged in the 1980s. So the first two commercial technologies were SLA, stereolithography, which was invented by Chuck Hull in the 1980s. He patented it and started 3D Systems, which is still one of the leading companies today, and they have way more than SLA today, but they're still the original SLA company and do a lot with that, and it's come ridiculously far since then. So that's photopolymer technology that basically uses a vat of resin and light cures layer by layer to create things.
Mm-hmm.
And almost simultaneously in the 80s was FDM, which is the trademarked name for fused deposition technology, which was at the company that became Stratasys. And so Stratasys trademarked that. And that's like what you think of when you think 3D printing. I would show you my little desktop 3D printer, but it's kind of a mess right now.
It's like the one that sort of has a
That's,
little nozzle, right?
that's the desktop. Like, well, a lot of them are desktop, but it's got the extruding nozzle that builds up and in front of you out of a plastic filament. So like all these little boxes right here in my office are filament
Oh. Mm-hmm.
for my desktop printer. So Stratasys held the patent on FDM technology until the early mid 2000s. And then once that patent wasn't in effect anymore, the non-trademarked version of FDM is FFF, which is fused filament fabrication, which is the same thing, just without a copyright on it.
Name.
Yeah, that's the one that anyone can say that they have.
I see.
So now if you talk about that desktop extrusion technology or industrial size, because some of those machines are huge, like meter class, like actually a meter.
Wow.
3D printer, and a lot of those are, they use pellet as feedstock instead of spools of plastic filament. So that's FFF. But now the ASTM recognizes 7 different 3D printing technologies. There are some companies who say they've invented their own class, but until the ASTM officially goes with it, we're saying that there are 7. So that's like vat polymerization, which is SLA, DLP, and other kind of light projector based. FFF extrusion, there's sheet welding, there's just a lot of them, binder jetting, a lot of metal ones, powder bed fusion. So basically, the major classes of materials are polymers, which is by far the biggest, metals, which is up and coming, and it's the one everyone's like, oh my gosh, you can 3D print metal.
Oh.
So very cool, very up and coming, but still less far along in development than the polymer technologies. But then you can also work with ceramic materials, you can work with food pastes. There are construction 3D printing companies that are 3D printing building walls at this point. So there are 3D printed buildings out in the world right now.
Wow.
They're not fully 3D printed, it's mostly the walls, but please disregard any headlines you see that say, this building was 3D printed in 24 hours. Like, it was not. It had walls in 3D in 24 hours, but they weren't even cured yet. Like cement concrete takes a long time to cure.
I see.
And then it needs HVAC, it needs electrical, it needs a roof, it needs plumbing, it needs, like, A house was not 3D printed in 24 hours, but there were some walls. And walls are good. They're important. It takes a long time to frame out a house. So it's nice to be able to do that on a huge gantry. But basically, 3D printing started as a rapid prototyping technology. So it's really the fail faster, fail better technology, because prototyping is a huge bottleneck in bringing new products to market.
Right.
And until you have an actual model you can look at and feel and touch and show to marketing and show to the world, show to investors, show to people who might want it, and it looks and feels and performs like the real thing, it's going to take you a while. And so being able to bring 3D printers in-house and do that can strip months to years off the go-to-market process, just from the prototyping standpoint. But then more recently, like only in the past decade, really, you've got end-use products, because what a lot of people don't realize today is almost every hearing aid on the market was 3D printed.
Oh.
Almost every orthodontic aligner, like Invisalign or Smile Direct Club, those are made with 3D printing.
I see. You have
So
to
those are,
conform to the specific body.
because those can be made specifically for everyone. So mass customization is one of the biggest benefits people lay out for 3D printing.
Cool.
So like everyone's ear canal is different. Like I had my ear 3D scanned at CES a few years ago, and I learned I have short ear canals.
Huh.
Which makes sense, because I can't wear earbuds. I can't wear earplugs or earbuds, and I never really knew why. So when they scanned my ear canals, they're like, oh, you've got really short ear canals. I was like, oh, that makes sense. I can't wear just like market ready ones.
They'll have to make some custom ones for you.
Basically. But now it took 500 days, less than 500 days, for the entire hearing aid industry to switch like 98% to 3D printing for the final hearing aids.
Wow.
So that's the single biggest use case, that like this is a really impactful technology. And so now there are something like 10,000 hip implants in people that have been 3D printed out of metal.
Wow.
Cranial implants, a lot of different implants, vertebrae are huge. And then surgical models. So if you see any surgery recently for face transplants, hand transplants, separating conjoined twins, a lot of that was modeled with 3D simulation software and then made possible with 3D printed surgical guides, and in a lot of cases, surgical tools, and 3D printed anatomical models. Some of them can be multi-material and really simulate tissue and blood vessels, so surgeons can actually practice before they go into a 30-hour surgery to separate, twins conjoined at the head.
Wow.
So there are several really high-profile cases that highlight this. Like last month, there was a case that was the world's first face and double hand transplant surgery. So a company called Materialize worked on all of that, and they did a lot of the 3D simulation for the software end. They did a lot of the medical models, because all of that was done in a single surgery, which is insane. And that patient, he's thriving now. It's been, the better part of a year since both transplants. He is lifting weights.
That's amazing.
I can't do with, my born hand. I could. I'm lazy.
Wow.
But
so amazing. Yeah. That's so cool.
So all of this is like actually impactful. And then there's, consumer products and other things like that. So end use production is really on the minds of a lot of people, but it's not going to happen until 3D printing can meet and exceed cost and quality of current solutions. So a lot of times you'll see 3D printing for end use production in really high value, like high margin, low volume applications like aerospace. So you're saying your husband works with GE, so GE has done a ton. They've got a lot of use cases for this. So they acquired Morris Technologies a few years ago, which had 3D printed kind of the poster child for end use 3D printing, which is this fuel nozzle that everyone in the industry, like, we're all sick to death of it, but it's this amazing thing to bring up. but it's still this great use case because people outside the industry, they're like, well, how does this work? And it's like, that is flying on planes. Like that is in the engine turbine. That is in the air right now.
That's
And there
so
have been
cool.
thousands made. Yeah.
So what do you think about the future? I mean, I'm thinking, will there be a day where everybody will have their little 3D printer, and if I order something online, then that thing will print for me, like a pair of shoes or something? I don't know. Is this like too out there?
I mean, no, in the longer term, because right now you can 3D print at home accessories for your IKEA stuff. They have files online. If you need a new drawer pull or a new oven knob.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
So IKEA does that. A lot of appliance manufacturers like Whirlpool, like the big guys, they do this through companies like Spare Parts 3D. Will do it for you if it's something, that really needs to kind of fit manufacturer specifications.
Hmm.
So a lot of the use cases right now are in spare parts and are in maintenance, repair, and operational, applications, where it's like this thing broke, we don't have it on the shelf anymore because it's 30 years old. No one makes it. How do I get it? My entire piece of equipment is down because of this, nozzle this big. It's
Hmm.
like if you have the file, you can just print it. If not, you can scan it, reverse engineer it, do that work, and then 3D print it. And depending what technology you're using and what you need, a lot more materials are becoming certified all the time. So
Hmm.
it's really great to see, like you can use the same material. You can use the same Ultim, you can use the same PEEK or PEC material that was made for the original
Hmm.
and 3D printed on a high temperature system. And it's done. As far as, doing stuff at home, it's more kind of knobs and small things right now. Like I've seen a lot of people make like furniture feet. Like if you want to move your couch around or even like lift your couch a little bit,
Hmm.
you can do that. A lot of kind of comfort things, a lot of wire housings if you want to just kind of get all of your computer wires in one place. Kind of small practical things like that, or pencil holders, which we're all working from home. We all need those.
That's
I
really
use
cool.
a ridiculous little thing to just, keep my phone on my desk
Okay.
with my phone holder.
Nice. I feel like I need to get one, like a 3D printer, just because I feel like so many people have it now, and it'll be really fun.
I do. And it's funny to see a lot of my friends, especially from different communities,
Hmm.
have them. Like I have a lot of geeky friends, obviously, like the theater thing stays strong. A lot of my friends are cosplayers. So it's huge in cosplay, making
Oh,
costumes and props.
awesome. Hmm.
So you can download the files or design your own. Like I definitely don't design my own stuff. It's hard. It is a huge skill set, and I am so impressed by designers at every step. But I know how to download and slice files, so
Hmm. That's
you can do
cool.
that. But
You
with
mentioned
home ones,
also like the food. I'm just wanted to, follow up on that. Like, will I be able to print my own hamburger? Like, how does that work?
so there are companies working on 3D printing meat substitutes a lot. There's an Israeli company called Redefine Meat that's been raising a lot of funding, and they've done blind taste tests where people can't tell, like it's not hamburger or lamb, but it's actually this, lab grown meat substitute
Wow.
that's like there's some that are plant based, there are some that use meat cells that are then grown further in a lab.
Wow.
Um, but they're extruded for taste and texture and all of that. But it's the same kind of, nozzle based, just a wider paste dispensing system. And some of it seems really good, but other parts, like it can also be used, there are the novelty things like 3D printing my own burger, but
Yeah.
then there's like realizable use cases like 3D printing softer foods for seniors and people who
Oh,
have trouble swallowing.
right.
So you can make sure to get all of the nutrition in there that people need and then keep it softer so it doesn't harden as much,
Mhm.
because there's a lot, like one of the great things about this technology is that it can be used for uh, helping people, for kind of meeting the needs of people with disabilities, whether that's adaptive goods like kind of a finger thing that can act as a, oh my gosh, It's amazing how many words I forget right now. A stylus.
Oh, yeah,
You
okay.
can use that for a stylus, or you can adapt a keyboard so you can type better. You can 3D print things for the visually impaired that have braille or, physical maps that you can feel. So you can get your
Oh,
bearings on a college campus. And a lot of like globes and things that are labeled for the hearing impaired, books, art. So a lot of it's really adaptive and great for that. But then when it's food, there's, to make it easier to swallow. There's also to make it for personalized medicine. So you can 3D print pharmaceuticals, not you, but, compounding pharmacies and the big drug companies can 3D print pharmaceuticals that are formulated just for you. So it can be like the 5-drug cocktail a cancer survivor needs every day, or someone who's had a transplant and needs a specific cocktail daily of anti-rejection drugs, or just whatever someone's on. The first FDA approved medication is for epilepsy, and so it dissolves when you put it on your tongue, and that was maybe 5 years ago now. So it's been really cool to see it coming. Companies have been working with 3D printing fun-shaped pills so that kids can take them, because a kid will be more willing to take a dinosaur or a star than, I don't know, I guess Flintstones vitamins aren't in vogue anymore. They were in my day, but maybe my son will have, 3D printed dinosaurs at some point.
awesome. That is so cool. Like, thank you so much for telling me about the different applications. Because I think, more like what I thought was like, oh, like these little toys, or like you said, like rapid prototyping. That's like kind of
Yeah.
what I had, envisioned or in mind. But there just seems like there's a endless possibilities of different.
Yeah, I mean, like it's huge in defense, in aerospace, in industry, making tooling, making molding, making the stuff you need to make injection molding equipment, like just a lot of things. Medical is huge, aerospace is huge. Those are really kind of the big, big banner applications everyone likes to talk about, but it's everywhere. And then footwear, orthopedics, eyewear.
That's
Like,
amazing. Like I'm an engineer, right? Or I was. I'm not working as an engineer anymore. But
engineer.
in the engineering field, I think for us, there's women are definitely, in the minority. And that's also true in 3D printing, right? Although you said, there's a growing community of female 3D printing people, right? Professionals.
Yeah.
So,
It's
and you're
still a very like small minority. Estimates range from 11 to 15% at the high end of women in the industry.
that's still very small.
It's like 15%, like 1.5 is the high end of estimates for the overall industry. Most peg it more at 13% female. But so yeah, because it's hard, like 3D printing is at that intersection of tech, which is super male dominated, and manufacturing, which is super male dominated. So then both of them come together, and look at all the white dudes. It's just got this legacy on both ends of a lot of men, primarily white men. So like there just aren't a lot of women in the industry, and that's changing, because the nice thing is, it's this young growing technology for this brave new world where our generation was raised on girl power. Like it never once occurred to me in my admittedly very privileged middle class white upbringing that I couldn't be anything I wanted to be.
Mhm.
I steered clear of math things because I'm bad at math. Like it was a personal understanding, not like, oh, this isn't for girls. I never felt a barrier, but I talked to so many engineers. For International Women's Day this year, I did a piece for Siemens Energy where I interviewed 3 of their amazing female engineers, and the ultimate piece was, like 1,500 words maybe, but our interview was like an hour. And so we had this great in-depth conversation about just the experiences, because they're each different ages, different points in their career, and came from different backgrounds, different countries, and work in different countries now because Siemens Energy is very global. And so the experiences in Florida versus Germany versus Sweden, are very different. But all of them remembered being, one of very few women in their engineering classes and being up against that and, not always being put off by it because they are clearly working successful engineers today, but, it's not something that goes unnoticed when you're the only one who looks like you in a room. Notice that one of the engineers in the interview is both Black and gay, so she definitely like has a different perspective to bring, and she can look around and be like, okay, so it's me here.
Like how do we find the common ground, right?
And the other two are married mothers of two, and they have considerations that, again, their male colleagues just don't, because as always, the assumption is kind of that women do the brunt of childcare. And a lot of that's cultural, but it impacts so much of especially Western society that it just is another consideration on women's plates. And so there's always that awareness of being othered at a table, especially the more minority groups you kind of slot into. Like, as a white woman, I will be the only woman at a table, but I am never the only white person in the room. I mean, when I was doing I was when I was in Taiwan, but I went to Taiwan, and then I was the only white woman in the room. But that I had to travel literally across the world to have that experience that so many people have every day of their lives. And so the more you notch into more of those areas of otherness, it gets difficult in different ways, and ways that a lot of people in the majority just don't see or experience or become aware of. I had a talk last week with a white guy in my industry who is incredible. I adore him. I think he's amazing, and he is starting important conversations and doing really important work with his recruiting company and working together a lot of data. But he said that he was embarrassed because it only recently started to occur to him to ask these questions because he is the father of two daughters. And he's starting to realize how his daughters are being treated versus how he was when he was 6. And so then he kind of opened his eyes, and his wife was even like, well, yes, I could have told you that. And it didn't occur to him to ask. Like at events, sometimes like male colleagues have offered to walk me back to my hotel, and I'm usually like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm not worried. But after one bad experience, I was like, you know what? Yeah, why don't you walk me back to my hotel? That is okay. You're a person I trust. It is now whatever time at night this networking event ended. Like, yes, please do walk with me. But like, again, I didn't really think about it because I'm also 6'1". Like, I look intimidating. People leave me alone a lot. I'm a giant weenie, but no one knows that if I'm just standing there, because I also have a chronic case of resting bitch face. So like if you're just tall, stony faced and kind of standing there with your arms crossed, like people leave you alone, which can be great. Like it's hard at networking events because you're like, oh, I should be approachable. But afterward, like I've got a long stride and a fast walk. So I don't have a lot of issues. I'm not going to say none. Like I was still raised to walk with my fingers between my keys between my fingers. We all were.
Really? Wow.
Like pretend to be on your phone, but don't actually be on your phone, because if people think you can call for help, they're less likely to attack you. But don't actually be on your phone because you need to be aware of your surroundings and listening to everything happening. So it's just all those little things that as women, I think we're really used to when we walk at night somewhere. I mean, like I still live around Cleveland, and as far as big cities go, it's kind of cute. So I've never felt that worried even walking around downtown Cleveland late at night by myself. But like that doesn't mean I'm never unaware of my surroundings, but it's all those things that like a lot of men don't really think about. They're like, oh, why don't we meet here at this time? It's like, oh, well, I don't want to go out at that time by myself to meet you there. And they're like, why not? Oh, well, okay.
Yeah, that's so true though, because I think when people don't have or they don't deal with those experiences every day, then like it's just not a consideration. Like I'm relatively shorter, I'm 5'1", and I remember, when we used to hang out in high school, you're like, whoa, like very tall compared to me, and I was like, oh, I just want to grow like a couple more inches. It's like, Sarah, give me a couple inches.
I would have. I still would. Yeah, in high school, I was like, oh, the girls are so short and cute. And like, here's Jen, and she's so short and cute. And like, girls are supposed to be short and cute. And
That also goes, against, because like as I was working, right, like as an engineer, like with a lot of men, most of them are taller. Um, and I think I struggled, trying to get that promotion or trying to get that leadership role to be, the leader of those men who are much bigger than me. Whereas like I'm curious, in your position or in your experience, do you feel like your height has given you an edge, or do you feel like there has also been negative in some way?
what's really funny about it is kind of twofold. The first is that I came into leadership in this industry really quickly. I answered a job ad out of nowhere online for a writing and editing position for a growing news site. Based on nothing but that, I applied and got a job and was a writer and editor at 3dprint.com. And 10 months later, they sold the site. And the new ownership offered me the position of editor-in-chief. And I was just like, okay, I do this now. And that's when I started traveling and doing things for what was really a growing site with a lot of visibility that I was prepared for. And thankfully I had that, almost year of building up knowledge about the industry and about the site and my goals. But then when I started traveling, I was really new to leadership in the industry. But all of that happened without my having met in person anyone I was working with,
Oh,
except the people I had hired. So the people who'd hired me, the people who then came to own the site, I never met in person until I'd been working there for a year and a half and was already in the editor-in-chief role. So everything, like I'd talked to some of them on Skype, but we'd never met in person. So it turns out I'm like half a foot taller than the brothers who founded the site. And none of us had any idea. So they're just these very entrepreneurial twins. And I am just a person who works really hard at things. And so there are all these studies that show that taller people do get promoted faster, which I've always found really interesting. Like taller people, especially men, tend to earn like an actual studied percentage higher salary and get promoted at a studied percentage higher rate than people of equivalent skill sets who are, this much shorter, et cetera.
wow.
Like there have been studies done, and I've always found that fascinating. And I'm like, haha, something in my favor, because very little is, from, pants shopping to just fitting in society.
Hey, I need some custom 3D printed pants because every pants I get is too long for me. So maybe you can.
Better luck with shoes. I do have some 3D printed shoes. They're great.
That's so cool.
They are, actually. It's a really great use of the tech. Pants are a little farther off, but there are actually like smart weaving and knitting technologies that are really cool.
Wow.
Like programmable knitting. I don't know, people are really impressive. But yeah, so I guess I felt the benefits of being a tall working person without anyone actually knowing I was. But that's kind of weird, because then when I get to events, people are like, oh, I did not know. And I'm like, well, I didn't know you were short. Can we get on with it? So like, it's interesting, but I do feel like as a youth, it was really hard. Like it was really, really hard to be taller than everyone, especially all the boys, because I didn't have like a growth spurt. I just always was the tallest in the class, often like boy or girl, which was also why my parents put me that year ahead in school, because they knew that I was projected to be 6 feet tall. So they knew like I would be even more of a standout with kids my age than with the kids a year older. So that, went into play even from my parents thinking and getting me into school. But then like throughout my career, I've always been kind of, and in school, even in college, like I've always been in leadership positions. Like when I look at the activities I did in college, I was on the executive team of almost every organization, like from my sorority to the theater honorary and the English one. And I was in every honorary also in college. I'm apparently a joiner. Like if there's a group I can join,
I will join.
apparently don't do it and then go into leadership because I'm a dip. I don't like saying no. And if there are things I can do, like, why would I not? But yeah, so I don't know if that kind of fed into all that, but like as a kid, it was really hard to stand out like that, especially like when I was shy, when I was quiet. I didn't know what my strengths were. I didn't know who I was as a person because I was a kid, you know. You learn that, you form that as you grow. And I was a big journaler, but I still didn't like have a super sense of self and like, this is the me to put forward. And then, 20 years on, I realized like, I still don't, but you just go with what you've got. And I'm confident in that now. So it's cool. But like, especially with that theater background, obviously in theater, it's the exact opposite gender ratio issue. There are women everywhere in the theater. And so in high school in particular, I was always cast as either, weirdly, an old person or a whore or a man who was often an old person. So like, seriously, like there was nothing between hooker and old person, except the one time I was a dude who was a coal miner. I had a wife for no reason. I was basically an extra and they gave me a wife. I'm like, really, guys?
That's amazing.
So I was just always like an old dude a lot. Like I was the granny in Into the Woods. I was Tiresias in Antigone. A streetwalker in, I forget what show that even was, but I did get to sit on a piano in fishnets, which if that's not every 17-year-old's dream to have her parents come see her in that role, I don't know what is. But like in college, it got a lot better for me as a theater major because that's when I met kind of the concepts of gender blind, color blind casting. And they would just cast the person best for the role. So when I was 18, I was cast as Pazzo in Waiting for Godot. And it was the coolest role, I'd ever had at that time in my life. And it was very racy and edgy and all of those like experimental college fun things. But it was a cast of 5 and Pazzo was, in the script male, but it didn't matter. So it was kind of when that came into play and we could just be with the best fit for the role. I also noticed the quality of the shows got a lot better when it wasn't like, we need an ingenue for this role. We need a big, strong man for this role. It was like, no, we need a character actor. We need this, like, we need the person who can act instead of high school where my high school boyfriend was a beautiful boy and he knew it. So he always got great roles as an attractive boy in theater. Unfortunately, he was a terrible actor and a worse singer. But he got all the roles because he was a good-looking boy in a very small pool of boys who wanted to act.
Well, that's kind of true still, like in Hollywood, right? I mean,
Hollywood's kind of its own thing. That's why I like the stage.
Yeah. But I think what you're saying is it makes sense too, just in the working world as well, right? Like it shouldn't matter what you look like or what your gender is or how tall or how short you are, is who can do the job, right?
Exactly. And like who fits that role within the company and who fits that. And it's not always like, because one of the biggest problems I've been finding companies have in hiring and especially retaining female talent comes in the way that they're bringing that talent in, because there are a couple of issues that come into play just systematically. And one is that studies have shown that women will respond to job listings where they fit 90 to 100% of the criteria, and men will respond at 60%. And a lot of those times the men will get the job. But then hiring managers will look at male candidates and say, okay, yeah, he's got a lot of potential. He was educated at this university we know well. He interned here. He's worked here. Like, this guy has a lot of great potential. We'll go with him. And a female candidate comes in maybe with those same qualifications, and they're like, okay, yeah, but what has she done? Like, what projects has she led? What are her results? What are her tricks? And it's about his potential and her results.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's always this conception, especially when I talk to female engineers, and they say, you know, I have to be twice as good as the men, and I have to be prepared to be twice as good,
Mm-hmm.
because any failure is like, oh, well, yeah, I didn't think she was ready for that. Whereas if a guy fails the same build, they'll clap him on the back and just go like, okay, and we learned from this. That's what makes this one fail. Like, now dust yourself off and do it again. And women are more likely to have that kind of be a mark against them.
Mm-hmm.
And if not, then to perceive it themselves that way and have a harder time bouncing back because they've had that happen before.
Right. And then when you complicate that with race, right? And it's like,
So
now
much.
you have to be quadruple the amount better, or
Exactly. Because then especially, you know, hiring managers are like, it's human nature to hire people who look like you, who, you know, when you get a rapport with someone, a lot of times it's because of what you have in common. And so it can become more about how you get along with the hiring manager than about your qualifications. And it can be so hard if you look different, if you have a different background, if you have a different accent,
Mm-hmm.
if any of those things come into play, because you're always fighting against those preconceived notions and that otherness that again comes into it. And so, like, even a lot of companies that are like, oh, look at our gender ratio. It's like, okay, I've noticed you have no people of color on your team now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
your picture kind of glows in the dark. And I'm saying that as someone who glows in the dark. Like, I know I'm also a little washed out right now with my window in front of me, but like, let's be real. I glow in the dark. I'm very, very white. Like, 23andMe confirmed it. I'm like 99.9% super white.
Wow.
I think the 0.1 is they're just like, no one's 100% white. So
It's so important for, non-minorities, right, or majority groups to be allies, right? To like
yeah,
do the work that you're doing to promote diversity, to promote equity. And there's a big difference between just saying like, oh yeah, look at our numbers or whatever, rather than like actually actively doing the work of recognizing different types of talents, different types of backgrounds and contributions. I think it's equally, important to have that, because, that's where you start, right? Especially when that's where like all the power is concentrated right now, that those people have to be the ones to make the change, to bring in the new voices.
definitely. Like, a lot of the times it really has to start at the top. And from conversations I've been having lately, it has to start at the top and or at the bottom, which is interesting because now we're getting this younger, more informed, more connected workforce who have more opportunity really to actually say like, I will not work in these conditions, and are, proving that by leaving. Like, I'm not a fit at this job, I'm leaving it. And a lot of times there's not even a next landing place. They just know that this isn't a fit, this is not where they're going to thrive. But then, when it starts at the top, there's actual work that can be done throughout the entire company. And that has to start with saying it. That has to start with the conversation. And like, until it is actually in that company's DNA, you have to say it. You have to make the statement like, we are going to be committed to hiring and to retaining talent that is more diverse. We are setting these metrics as goals. Like, within 5 years, we'll have a 30% female board. Within 50%, we'll have a 50-50 gender equitable workplace. Within this much, we want our POC representation to be this. We want to look at different measures of diversity. We want to look at age, race, educational background, national background. We want to look at neurodiversity. We want to look at people of different physical capabilities and abilities. We want to look at all of these different things. Like, that's the problem with diversity, is like, it's not one thing. Because I started with women in 3D printing, like, okay, I was sexually harassed because I'm a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got involved in the organization, but then it's like, okay, no one's talking about sexual harassment. Okay, well, it's not only happening to women. okay, well, harassment isn't only a sexual harassment issue. Okay, it's also this. Okay, it's also, and then like
Like a
everything
can
we
of
look,
worms that just keeps coming up.
there are just all of these things. And, then obviously the world compounds upon all of that. In 2018, we launched the Women in 3D Printing Diversity for AM reports that highlight this. And we started by focusing on gender parity, just because that most closely aligns with the original message, the original mission of Women in 3D Printing, and the data that we had at hand and the conversations we were having. And so we started to slowly expand that and look at different measures of diversity. But last summer, in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests, we wanted to do a special edition of the report. And I've been writing these since we started them, but I was like, I'm not the author for this. Like, this is a conversation I want to help facilitate. It's not one I can lead. It's not for me to take that seat. So thankfully, we were able to work with an author of color from Belgium, and she put together a really wonderful report with experiences and connections that, were hers, that were true, that were really necessary, I think, to the integrity of this report. And so with each successive one, I want to be able to bring in different voices to really kind of head those efforts. But it's hard because you don't want to talk about what makes you different a lot of times, because when we approached this author, she said at first, like, I try not to have these conversations. I try to just do my work and fit in. Well, like, you are a Black woman in the industry. Like, if you are comfortable leading this conversation, we think you would be the right person to do it. And so she did eventually realize she had been not talking about it for so long that now was a good time to talk about it. And the same is happening with a lot of people in the Asian community now in the industry, with the ridiculous anti-Asian sentiment that's happening now because of the world being stupid and the previous administration being what it was and enabling that. It's, again, for allies to help raise and foster these voices. Like, this is your experience. You are the one who should be leading this conversation. I am, here to be aware that I have a platform that can help. And I think that's what allyship needs to start at, just being aware of the privilege. And part of my privilege is that I'm a journalist and a person who works with public platforms. And so, amplifying stories is what I do. A lot of the times it's look at this new 3D printer, look at this new material, look at this investment round. But I don't feel like I'm responsible with the platform I've built up on, like, my own LinkedIn platform, my own Twitter platform, if I'm not using my personal networks to also say, look at the amazing work that my colleague of color is doing here. Look at the terrible experience my colleague of color has had here. Like, we need to have this conversation. We need to have it within the industry, because, like, we can't do societal change all in one go. But if our little tiny section of the manufacturing industry can start to have some change, and the whole point of the 3D printing, revolution is to be revolutionary, like, why not have that be built more on tech? If this industry is supposed to be better than what's out there now, like, I think that should extend to all aspects of it. And the industry as a whole is stronger with more voices. And I don't know, we need that allyship, we need that sponsorship, we need that amplification and humility to have those conversations, because without them, nothing's going to happen. And then once we have actionable programs in place to share those resources and say, like, we've discovered one way that this helps to make change, and it's with this conversation, please join us. We have discovered a way that helps HR managers, like, we invite other HR managers to join in this. We've discovered that chief diversity officers and chief transformation officers are having a real impact on their companies. And we can point to that 2018 McKinsey study that was able to quantify the actual, results on higher revenue for more diverse companies, and say, like, it's not just a good idea, it's not just good humanity, but because we're a capitalist society, look, it's good for your bottom line. Like
Mm-hmm.
you perform better when your company is better, and your company is better with more voices. Because like if you have a bunch of Ivy League educated white guys around the table, they all had the same education. They were all trained to think in the same way. But if you get, one guy from that table, somebody from a liberal arts college, somebody who was trained in China, someone who was trained in Australia, and they all come at it having been trained to think in different ways, everyone's approaching a problem from different angles. And that's how you're going to find, a better solution that, I wouldn't have thought of. I was trained at a liberal arts school in Southeastern Ohio. There's no way I would have thought about this way that someone, in Chile was trained. So why would I not want that on my team?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Wow, that's so awesome. I love everything you just said. So inspirational. So I just have one last question. I know we don't want to take too much of your time. You've already been so generous with your time. Do you have any last words of advice for maybe young people who are looking into getting into manufacturing, 3D printing, or words of advice for people of color or people who are whether female or non-binary, different gender groups? Um, what what words of advice do you have? Or I think especially when kids are in high school or college, like we don't necessarily think about 3D printing as a major or as a career.
Yeah, which is also insane. Like I remember when I was at a conference for the first time meeting someone working on a master's degree in additive manufacturing. And I was just like, how are you getting actual training on this? Like I have learned everything just on the go and on the ground, which is a great way to learn, but it's not formal. But now there are apprenticeships, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and PhDs actually focused on additive manufacturing. And whether that be the technology kind of conceptually, whether that be material science, hardware, software, there is formal training now, which still blows my mind. Like I've only been in this industry since 2014, but something I saw, on LinkedIn today, someone referred to me as longtime journalist. I was like, I guess I'm not new anymore. But basically my advice would be like, start to become familiar with the resources available to you. One of the great things, I guess one of the silver linings more of the pandemic is the rise of the webinar. And there are so many free resources now. And so we're all able to connect a lot more easily, either for networking or just to learn. So you can really, like, if you think you're interested, give it an hour, sign up for a webinar, listen to people who are doing it. And a lot of the talks are from engineers, like a lot of the high profile ones, it's C-suite people, but you might connect more with someone from, an engineer or design perspective, or even a consumer use case, and just like sit at your computer for an hour, kick your feet up and listen to people who do it. Is this something that interests you? What is it about that calls to you? Is it the design aspect? Is it the transformational aspect? Is it getting your hands, into things and just creating differently? Like the resources out there are ridiculous. My usual go-to advice is to network and go to events, but hopefully soon we can do that again. Until then, everything is virtual, but like Women in 3D Printing put on our first virtual conference in January of this year. And we had 147 female speakers.
Wow.
Every speaker on our agenda was female. So now I'm just looking at everyone who doesn't have a female speaker and they're like, we can't find one. I'm like, we found over 200. We
Wow.
could only fit this many in the agenda. Like they're out there. There is this expertise. But our conference was also free to attend. We had 1,600 attendees from the world over joining over the 2 days.
So cool.
And there was live networking on the computer. So you could actually talk to people the way we're talking now, So it's really just be aware of resources, be aware of groups. There are some amazing industry organizations. Like obviously Women in 3D Printing is dear to me, but there's women in manufacturing, there's people of color in technology, there's Black women of science and engineering. Like there are a lot of groups out there. And so finding a group, and it's not, you know, women in 3D printing, we have a 10,000 member strong community. Half of that's men. Like again, like we need those allies. We need people to be building actual communities. So like, we're not closing the door. And when there are women in 3D printing events, like we want men there because they're part of this, and they need to be part of the people saying, hey, you know, I look around the room and everyone does look like me. Maybe that is a problem. And to listen. And so going about it that way, and just, I would say for everyone it helps to approach anything new with humility and with the intent to learn. Some of the most successful CEOs I talk to in this industry, their advice that they followed through their whole careers is to learn something every day. And like, no matter what, everyone you meet knows something you don't. And as long as we keep that in mind, I think, you know, it's one of those little bitty building blocks that eventually form something so much stronger. So my basic advice is get out there, do it, look at resources, Google 3D printing, and read everything you can. Find out what you think is interesting. If it's writing about all of it, awesome. Like, we need more writers. I feel very alone sometimes still. Like, there are a lot of us, we need more, but we need more on every side. So if you think 3D printing inhabitable buildings is cool to help cut down on the homeless problem, awesome. Like, there are companies that do that. If you want to know more about 3D printing food, awesome. There are companies that do that, you know, 3D printing shoes, 3D printing for medical. If you want to just do simulation and test stuff until it breaks, like, that is also a real thing that you can do. So, you know, the job I have now, it did not exist when I was in high school. There's no way I could have foreseen my career path. So I would also say an open mind and just be aware of opportunities. And when you're not happy, make your own. And that's possible in all of these new technologies and a digitally connected world. So it's good, just, you know, do it and don't take bunk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. This has been so fun for me. I learned so much just talking with you. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, it was good to talk to you.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like and subscribe to this channel for even more awesome videos coming up. And feel free to share this video and other videos with your friends. Thank you for watching.